Theresa gripped the dumbbell tighter, her knuckles whitening around the cold metal. It was just another Tuesday evening at the gym, her sanctuary, where the rhythmic thudding of her heartbeat synced with the hum of treadmills and clanks of weights. But tonight, something was off. The air felt heavier, charged with a tension she couldn't immediately place. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on him, Mason, her husband of 5 years. He was at the far end, working on his biceps, his focus seemingly on the burn. But then she saw her, the woman. With lithe limbs and a high ponytail, she was laughing at something Mason said, touching his arm in a familiar way that friends rarely did. Theresa's heart sank. She tried to convince herself she was misreading the situation. Maybe they were just friends. Maybe it was nothing. She forced herself to look away to focus on her own workout, counting under her breath 1, 2, 3. But her eyes betrayed her, drawn back to Mason and the woman. "Hey, beautiful. Didn't see you there." Mason's voice snapped her back to reality as he approached, wiping sweat from his brow with a towel. The woman was right behind him, all smiles. "Hey," Theresa managed, her voice tight. "This is Jenna," Mason introduced, and Jenna waved, a bit too enthusiastically. "Hi, Theresa. Heard so much about you." Jenna's voice was chipper, her eyes bright. Theresa nodded, forcing a smile. "Nice to meet you." Mason and Jenna exchanged a look, one of those inside joke glances that made Theresa's stomach churn. "We were just about to grab some smoothies. Join us?" Mason asked, his tone casual. Theresa felt a lump in her throat. I still have a few sets left," she stammered, hoping her excuse sounded plausible. Cool. "Maybe next time then," Mason said. He patted her shoulder, a gesture that should have been comforting but felt patronizing. As he walked away with Jenna, Theresa couldn't help but notice the ease of their laughter, the natural sway of their bodies close together. Left alone with her thoughts and the dumbbell now feeling heavier than ever, Theresa's mind raced. Was she being paranoid? No, it was more than that. The signs were subtle but unmistakable. Her gut screamed betrayal, but her heart wasn't ready to accept it. She set the dumbbell down with a clatter louder than intended and slipped out to the locker room. Her reflection in the mirror was pale, her eyes red-rimmed. The person staring back at her seemed to be crumbling under the weight of sudden realization. Theresa leaned closer to the mirror, her breath fogging up the glass. "Is this really happening?" she whispered to her reflection, the question hanging in the humid air of the locker room. Trying to regain some semblance of control, she splashed cold water on her face, the chill momentarily grounding her swirling thoughts. "You need to see this through. Figure out what's really going on," she told herself sternly, drying her face with a rough paper towel. Back in the gym, she watched from a distance as Mason and Jenna laughed together at the smoothie bar, their heads close, sharing a moment of joy that once was exclusively hers and Mason's. The sight was like a punch to the gut, draining the fight from her. Theresa grabbed her gym bag, her workout forgotten. She needed space, needed to think away from here. As she headed for the exit, her phone buzzed. It was Mason. "Forgot my water bottle by the bench. Can you grab it for me?" Typing a quick reply, "Got it." Heading home now, Theresa scooped up the water bottle. It was just a water bottle, but as she held it, a mix of sadness and anger welled up inside her. How many times had she picked up after him? How many small acts of care had she given, only to feel invisible now? As she drove home, the streets blurred past her. Each stoplight was a moment to pause, to breathe, to stop the tears that threatened to spill. "This isn't the end," she murmured to herself. "It's just the beginning. The beginning of seeing things as they really are." Theresa knew the road ahead would be tough. As the city lights flickered past, reflecting off her car's window, they seemed to echo her resolve. It was time to confront Mason, to confront the truth of their relationship, whatever that might be. But first she needed to confront herself and muster the courage she knew was there, deep down inside her, buried under years of compromises and small surrenders. Tonight, it was about finding that courage, about preparing herself for the conversations and decisions that lay ahead. The silence of the house greeted Theresa as she stepped through the front door, the familiar scent of lavender and the soft creak of the aging wood floors now feeling strangely alien. She tossed Mason's water bottle on the kitchen counter with a little more force than necessary and headed straight for the bathroom, seeking solitude. Inside, she flicked on the light, casting a harsh glow over the small room. The mirror confronted her immediately, a relentless witness to her unraveling. She leaned on the sink, gripping the edges until her knuckles turned white, and stared at her reflection. Her eyes, usually bright and observant, now seemed dull, overshadowed by the creeping doubt and hurt. "Look at you," she muttered to herself, her voice laced with a bitterness that felt foreign on her tongue. A sudden flash of Mason's dismissive comments from the past weeks surged through her mind. "Are you sure that dress is your size, or maybe you should hit the gym with me?" Sometime words that had stung, but she had brushed aside, now replayed with a cruel clarity. Theresa reached out and traced the reflection of her face, her fingertips grazing the cool glass. "Is this what he sees? Is this why?" she whispered, the questions seeping into the silence. The house creaked softly, a reminder of its age and the many years she had spent within its walls, building a life she thought was on solid ground. She splashed water on her face again, hoping to wash away the creeping sense of inadequacy that clung to her skin just as tightly as her dampened hair clung to her cheeks. Wrapping a towel around her face, she slumped down against the bathroom door, pulling her knees close. The fabric muffled her sobs, each one a release of the pent-up emotions she had been holding back in the gym. After a few minutes, she stood up, steadied herself, and walked into the bedroom. The room was dark, lit only by the streetlight's glow sneaking through the blinds. Mason's side of the bed was untouched, the pillow still bearing the indent of his head from the previous night. She sat on the edge of the bed, her fingers tracing the cold, smooth fabric of the sheets. "Why didn't I see it coming?" she asked the empty room, her voice barely a whisper. The question hung in the air, unanswered. Theresa pulled out her phone, scrolling through old messages between her and Mason. Each "I love you" and each heart emoji felt like a lie now. She stopped at a picture of them together, smiling at a friend's wedding. They looked so happy, so in love. It was hard to reconcile that image with her current reality. The phone slipped from her fingers, landing softly on the carpet. Theresa lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. "What am I going to do?" she said aloud. Her voice was steady now, the initial shock giving way to a resolute need to act, to decide. Her next steps. There was no going back to the way things were, not after what she had seen and felt. She needed clarity and, more importantly, she needed to talk to Mason about everything. But first, she had to gather her strength, muster her courage, and prepare for what might be the most challenging conversation of her life. As she lay there, the silence of the room enveloped her. It was in these quiet moments that the gravity of her situation truly settled in. Theresa knew that the coming days would demand more from her than perhaps ever before, but she also knew she couldn't shy away from confronting the truth, no matter how painful it might be. With a deep breath, Theresa finally got up from the bed. She walked over to the window and pulled back the curtains, letting the light flood the room. The darkness receded, and so did some of her fears. "I can do this," she affirmed to herself, a newfound resolve firming her stance as she prepared for the dawn that awaited. As dawn crept through the blinds, painting the room with hues of grey and gold, Theresa sat at the edge of her bed, a box of old photographs in her lap. The musty smell of the cardboard mingled with the fresh morning air, grounding her in the reality of the moment. She sifted through the photos, each one a snapshot of her past her as a bright-eyed college graduate, on vacations, at family gatherings. Then she paused at a photograph of her and her first serious boyfriend, Ethan. They were at a carnival, cotton candy in hand, laughing. Ethan's arm was around her shoulder, and she looked genuinely happy. Sighing, Theresa remembered how that relationship had ended. Ethan had cheated on her, too. She'd been devastated, but it had also been a turning point. She had promised herself never to let someone hurt her like that again, yet here she was, feeling the same sharp sting of betrayal. She tossed the photo back into the box and pulled out another. This time it was her and Mason at a New Year's Eve party, not long after they'd started dating. His smile was wide, and he was looking at her like she was the only person in the room. Theresa remembered how secure and loved Mason had made her feel then. The contrast between that memory and her current situation was stark. She shook her head and muttered to herself, "How did we get here, Mason? What happened to us?" Theresa's phone buzzed on the nightstand, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a text from her sister, Vanessa. "Morning, T, just checking in. Everything okay?" Theresa stared at the message, debating how much to share. Finally, she typed back, "Not really. Can we talk?" As she waited for a response, she continued to look through the photographs, the images blurring as her thoughts deepened. Vanessa's reply came quickly, "Call me." Theresa dialed, and Vanessa picked up on the first ring. "Theresa, what's up? You sound upset." "It's Mason," Theresa started, her voice breaking slightly. "I think he's seeing someone else." "Oh, T, I'm so sorry," Vanessa said, her voice full of concern. "What are you going to do?" Theresa sighed, a weight lifting slightly as she spoke the truth aloud. "I don't know yet, but I need to do something. I can't just pretend everything's fine." "That's right, you can't," Vanessa affirmed. "Remember how strong you were with Ethan. You got through that mess. You can handle this too. You're not alone, okay?" "Yeah," Theresa replied, feeling a little stronger with her sister's support. "Yeah, you're right. I was strong then, and I can be strong now." As they talked, Theresa kept flipping through the photographs, each one a reminder of her resilience. They talked about practical steps, how to confront Mason, the need for clear communication, and the possibility of seeking counseling, either together or individually. Vanessa was pragmatic, grounding Theresa with her straightforward advice. "You need to know where you stand, T. If there's any chance to fix this, it starts with honesty. But if he's not in it anymore, then you have to think about your next steps." "I know," Theresa acknowledged. "It's just hard. You build a life with someone and then it feels like it's crumbling beneath you," Vanessa finished for her. "But remember, T, you're not just the ruins, you're the builder too. You can rebuild no matter what happens." Their conversation shifted towards reminiscing about their childhood, the challenges they'd faced together, and the strength they'd drawn from their family. It was a balm for Theresa's frayed nerves. By the time they ended the call, Theresa felt a renewed sense of purpose. She looked around her room, at the life she had built with Mason, and felt a firm resolve settle in her heart. She would confront Mason when he came home. She needed answers, and she would decide her path forward based on the truth, not just her fears and insecurities. Putting the photographs away, Theresa stood and stretched, her spine straightening with her bolstered resolve. She walked over to the window, pulled it open, and let the fresh air sweep into the room. The breeze felt like a new beginning, whispering possibilities and strength. With a deep breath, Theresa murmured to herself, "I can do this. I've done it before. I can do it again." Her reflection in the window nodded back, a silent pact between her present and her past, between her doubts and her undeniable strength. The house was quiet, the only sound the soft rustling of clothes and the occasional snap of a suitcase closing. Theresa stood in the middle of her bedroom, surrounded by the life she and Mason had built together. Each item she touched sparked a memory, each memory a twinge of what was or what could have been. She pulled a suitcase from the closet, the wheels scraping against the hardwood floor. As she opened it, the scent of leather mixed with a hint of lavender filled the air, reminding her of trips taken and plans made, now tainted with the shadow of betrayal. Theresa began methodically folding clothes, her hands moving with a precision that belied the turmoil inside her. She paused when she reached a drawer full of Mason's shirts. She pulled one out, held it to her face, and inhaled deeply. It still smelled like him, like cedarwood and citrus, a scent that had once comforted her. "I can't believe I'm doing this," she muttered to herself, her voice a mix of resolve and sorrow. She folded the shirt neatly and placed it in a separate pile for Mason. Her phone buzzed, breaking the rhythm of her packing. It was Mason. "Hey, we need to talk when I get home." Theresa stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. After a moment, she typed back, "Yes, we do." She set the phone aside without waiting for a reply, her decision firm. She continued packing, now more determined. Each item she placed in the suitcase felt like severing a tie, painful yet necessary. Photos, gifts, and personal mementos she handled each with a quiet reverence, acknowledging their part in her journey. Theresa's best friend, Claire, arrived, her presence a comforting embrace. "Hey, you okay?" Claire asked as she entered the room. "Yeah, I guess. Just doing what needs to be done," Theresa replied, managing a small smile. "Need a hand?" Claire offered, rolling up her sleeves. "Thanks," Theresa said, grateful not for just the physical help but the moral support. The two worked in tandem, a silent understanding between them. As they packed, Claire finally broke the silence. "You're doing the right thing, T. It's tough, but you're tough too." Theresa nodded, her heart heavy. "I know. It just hurts, you know. All those plans, all those dreams." Claire placed a comforting hand on Theresa's shoulder. "It's okay to grieve, T. It's okay to feel lost. But remember, this isn't the end of your story. It's just a new chapter." The afternoon waned as they packed, the room slowly transforming from a shared space filled with intimacy and connection to something more sterile, more functional. Boxes and suitcases lined the walls, each labeled with precision. As the final box was taped up, Theresa felt a sense of closure. She looked around the now bare room, each empty space a testament to her decision, to her courage to step forward into the unknown. "Ready?" Claire asked, standing by the door. Theresa took a deep breath, her gaze lingering on the room a moment longer. "Ready," she affirmed, stepping towards the door, towards her future. The evening sun slanted through the blinds, casting long shadows across the living room floor as Theresa heard Mason's key turn in the lock. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. This was the moment she had been dreading and preparing for all day. Mason stepped inside, pausing when he saw Theresa sitting on the couch, her posture rigid, surrounded by boxes and suitcases. His face, usually easy and open, tightened with confusion. "Theresa, what's all this?" he asked, his voice tinged with concern as he closed the door behind him. "We need to talk," Mason, Theresa said firmly, her voice steadier than she felt. Mason set down his gym bag and took a few tentative steps toward her. "Okay, talk to me. What's going on?" Theresa took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "I saw you at the gym yesterday. With her." Mason's expression shifted, his eyes widening slightly. "Jenna, she's just a friend from the office." "Don't," Theresa cut him off, raising a hand. "I've seen the way you two are together. It's more than just friendly, Mason, and even if it wasn't, it feels like there's already a distance between us. Something's changed." Mason sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't want it to come out like this." "So, it's true then," Theresa's voice cracked despite her best efforts to keep composed. Mason paused, looking down at his feet before meeting her eyes. "Yes, it's true." The room felt impossibly still. Theresa felt the weight of his admission settle around her like a cold shroud. Why was all she could manage, her voice barely a whisper? "I don't know, T. I felt something with her. I didn't plan for any of this. I'm sorry, so sorry." Mason's voice was fraught with remorse. Theresa shook her head slowly, feeling a strange detachment washing over her. "Sorry doesn't change what happened. It doesn't fix us." Mason moved closer, reaching out as if to touch her, then thought better of it. "What are you saying?" Theresa stood, her legs shaky but holding. "I'm saying I can't do this anymore. I can't be the only one trying to hold this together." "But, Theresa, I love you. We can fix this," Mason pleaded, his voice desperate. "I don't think we can," Theresa replied, her decision clear in her heart, though it pained her to vocalize it. "I need to find happiness, Mason, even if that means without you." Mason looked stricken, his features crumpling. "So, this is it? After everything?" Theresa nodded, the finality of the moment sinking in. "This is it." Mason stared at her, his eyes searching for something, any sign of the life they had shared. Finding none, he slowly nodded, his shoulders slumping. "I'll go stay with a friend tonight. Give you space." "That would be best," Theresa managed to say, her own heart aching as she watched him collect a few belongings. As Mason walked to the door, he turned back to look at her one last time. "I really am sorry, Theresa." Theresa nodded, unable to trust her voice. She watched him close the door behind him, the click of the latch echoing loudly in the empty room. She sank back onto the couch, the silence enveloping her. Despite the turmoil, a sense of relief began to seep through the cracks of her broken heart. She was free now, free to rebuild and find herself again, away from the shadows of doubt and betrayal. Theresa sat in the driver's seat of her car, parked in front of the house she once thought of as her forever home. The trunk was packed tight with her belongings, every item a chapter of her life closed with precision and care. She took one last look at the house, a silent goodbye, then started the engine. The drive to Illinois was long, the highway stretching before her like the vast, uncertain future. Theresa filled the silence with music, the car speakers playing a mix of classic rock and old pop hits, songs that she and Mason had once sung along to on road trips. Halfway through the drive, as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in strokes of orange and pink, Theresa's phone rang through the car speakers. It was her mum. "Hey, Mum," Theresa answered, her voice steady. "Hi, honey. Just checking in. How are you holding up?" her mum asked, her voice filled with concern. "I'm okay, Mum. On the road now. It's been tough, but I think I'm doing the right thing," Theresa said, her gaze fixed on the ribbon of road unwinding ahead of her. "I know you are, sweetheart. Just remember, your dad and I are here for you, no matter what." "Thanks, Mum." "It means a lot," Theresa replied, feeling a lump form in her throat. "Are you sure you don't want me to fly out and drive back with you? It's a long drive to be on your own," her mum offered once more, her protective instinct clear, even over the phone. Theresa chuckled softly, touched by the offer. "I'll be fine, Mum. I need some time to think, and the drive helps. I'll stop for the night if it gets too late." "All right, just be safe. We'll have dinner waiting when you get here," her mum said, a note of warmth in her voice that made Theresa's heart ache for home. "I will. Love you, Mum." "Love you too, honey." Theresa ended the call and let the silence envelop her once more. The familiar songs continued to play, each one a reminder of a past that was now just a memory. She sang along softly to herself, the melodies bittersweet on her tongue. As darkness fell, Theresa stopped at a small roadside motel to rest. The room was nondescript, the kind of place one forgets the moment they leave, but it was clean and quiet. She lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, the events of the past few days replaying in her mind. Despite the loneliness, there was a thread of relief woven through her thoughts. She was doing this for herself, reclaiming her life and her independence. The next morning, Theresa was back on the road early, the dawn light gentle and promising. As she drove, the landscape changed, the urban sprawl giving way to open fields and the occasional farmhouse. She felt herself relax, the closer she got to Illinois, to home. By late afternoon, the familiar landmarks of her childhood began to appear, each one tugging at her heartstrings. When she finally pulled into her parents' driveway, her dad was waiting at the door, ready to welcome her with open arms. Theresa stepped out of the car, and her dad enveloped her in a tight hug. "Welcome home, Theresa." "Thanks, Dad. It's good to be home," she said, her voice thick with emotion as she stepped back, a genuine smile breaking through the clouds of her recent troubles. They walked into the house together, the smell of her mum's cooking filling the air, a tangible reminder that no matter how far she strayed, there was always a place for her here, always a path back to love and support. Theresa woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside her childhood bedroom window. The sunlight streamed in, painting the familiar pink walls with a warm glow. It felt surreal to be back, like stepping into a past life she had left behind. She stretched, savouring the quiet of the morning before heading downstairs. The smell of coffee led her to the kitchen, where her mum was flipping pancakes. Morning, Mum Theresa greeted, wrapping her arms around her mother from behind. "Good morning, sweetheart," her mum replied, turning to give her a quick hug. "Sleep well." Like a rock, Theresa smiled, sitting down at the kitchen table. It feels weird to be back, but good weird. Her mum set a plate of pancakes in front of her, along with a cup of coffee. "It's good to have you home, honey. We can turn the good weird into just good." Theresa nodded, taking a sip of her coffee. "I hope so. I need to figure out what's next for me." "You will," her mum assured her, sitting down across from her with her own cup of coffee. "You're strong, Theresa. You've always landed on your feet." "Thanks, Mum. It's just hard to see the path right now," Theresa admitted, pushing around her pancakes more than eating them. "Give it time." "And speaking of paths, I ran into Janet from the community centre yesterday. She mentioned they're looking for volunteers for their new art program. Thought it might be something up your alley." Theresa perked up a bit. "Art program? That sounds actually really nice. I haven't painted in years. It could be a good way to get back into it. And meet some new people, get out of the house," her mum suggested gently. "Yeah, I think I'll check it out." "Thanks, Mum," Theresa said, feeling a spark of excitement for the first time in weeks. Later that day, Theresa drove to the community centre, a modest building she remembered visiting as a kid. Inside, she was greeted by Janet, a bubbly woman in her 50s with a contagious smile. "Theresa, so glad you could make it," Janet exclaimed, giving her a warm hug. "Your mum told me you were interested in our art program." "Yes, I'd love to learn more about it," Theresa replied, her interest genuine. "Well, follow me. Let me show you our little studio," Janet said, leading her through the hallways adorned with colourful murals and children's artwork. The studio was small but well equipped, with easels, paints and brushes all neatly organised. "We're really excited about this program. It's all about healing and expression. We believe art can do wonders for the soul," Janet explained. Theresa nodded, looking around at the canvases waiting to be filled. "I think I need a bit of that soul healing," she chuckled softly. "That's the spirit," Janet clapped her hands delightedly. "Why don't you join us for a session tomorrow? We're just getting started, so it's the perfect time to jump in." "I'd love to," Theresa agreed, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "Thank you, Janet." As she left the community centre, Theresa felt lighter than she had in days. Maybe it was the prospect of painting again, or maybe it was simply taking a step forward. Either way, she was beginning to rebuild her life, one brushstroke at a time. The early morning sun filtered through the blinds of the community centre's studio, casting a warm glow over the canvas in front of Theresa. She dipped her brush into the palette, the bright colours mingling under her careful strokes. Around her, the studio was alive with the sounds of other artists at work, each absorbed in their own world of creation. "Hey, how's it coming along?" a voice chimed beside her. Theresa turned to see a woman about her age, with a friendly smile and a streak of blue paint in her hair. "Hi, I'm Lucy," the woman introduced herself, extending a hand stained with various shades of paint. "Theresa," she replied, shaking Lucy's hand. "It's going. I'm a bit rusty, honestly." Lucy laughed, a light, easy sound. "Aren't we all? But that's the beauty of this place. It's more about the process than the product. What are you working on?" "It's supposed to be a landscape," I think Theresa said, stepping back from her canvas. The image was abstract, more a storm of emotions than a serene scene. "I like it. It's vibrant, full of energy," Lucy observed, studying the painting. "Keeps your eyes moving." Thanks, Theresa smiled, feeling a bit more confident. "I haven't touched a brush in years. Feels good to get back to it." Lucy nodded. "I hear you. I stopped painting after college and didn't start again until I found this place last year. It's been a lifesaver." The conversation flowed naturally, and Theresa found herself sharing more about her recent upheavals. Lucy listened intently, nodding in understanding. We all come here with our bag of rocks, Lucy said. Art helps us unload them, bit by bit. I could use some unloading, Theresa admitted, looking around at the others in the room, each focused on their own canvases. The sense of community was palpable, a shared space of healing and expression. You're in the right place, Lucy assured her. And if you ever want to talk, or paint, or just hang out, I'm around. I'd like that, Theresa said, her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. As the session ended, Theresa stood back and looked at her painting. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start of visual representation of her turmoil, but also of her resilience. Janet came by, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. Theresa, how did you find your first day back at it? It was really great, Janet. Thank you for encouraging me to come, Theresa replied, genuinely grateful. Keep coming, Janet smiled. Art's a good friend, keeps you company, lets you talk without interrupting. Theresa laughed, feeling a warmth spread through her. I think I'll take you up on that. As she left the studio, the morning air felt crisp, refreshing. She walked to her car with a new sense of purpose. Life was still uncertain, the path forward still a little unclear, but as she drove away, the weight on her shoulders felt lighter. She was moving forward, one day, one brushstroke at a time. A new dawn was breaking, not just outside but inside her as well. She was not just surviving, she was beginning to thrive. Months had passed since Theresa first walked back into her childhood home in Illinois. The season had changed from the crisp edges of fall to the deep chill of winter, but inside Theresa, a different kind of transformation had taken root, one that brought warmth and renewed light to her life. Theresa stood in front of the community center, watching families and individuals bustling in and out. The art program had flourished under the influx of local interest, partly due to an exhibit they had recently held, showcasing works that spoke of healing and new beginnings, themes that resonated deeply in the community. Theresa called a voice from behind. She turned to see Janet, bundled up in a bright red scarf, her eyes sparkling with excitement. I've been looking for you. We got the grant. Theresa's face lit up, mirroring Janet's excitement. That's amazing, Janet. This means. It means we can expand the program, reach more people, offer more classes, Janet interrupted, her words tumbling out rapidly. And I want you to help run some of them. You've got a knack for this, Theresa. Theresa was momentarily taken aback, the offer sinking in. I'd love to, Janet. It's something I believe in deeply. I know you do. And you're good at it, Janet affirmed, giving Theresa's arm a reassuring squeeze. You've come so far, Theresa. It's inspiring. Thanks, Janet. It feels good to be part of something that helps people heal. Helps me heal, Theresa confessed, looking around at the community center that had become a second home to her. Later that evening, Theresa sat in the cozy living room of her parents' house, a fire crackling softly in the background. Her parents sat across from her, cups of tea in hand. You seem different, Theresa. In a good way, her dad remarked, his tone gentle, proud. Theresa smiled, feeling the truth of his words. I feel different. I feel like I've found a piece of myself I didn't even know was missing. Her mum nodded, her eyes warm. We've noticed. It's like you're breathing easier, standing taller. I am. It's the art, the community, the kids and families I work with. It's given me a purpose I didn't expect to find, Theresa explained, her voice soft but filled with conviction. And what about Mason? Have you heard from him? Her dad asked cautiously. Theresa paused, her past with Mason seeming like a distant echo now. I have, a few times. He's doing his own healing, I guess. We're okay, Dad. We're not together, but we're okay. That's good to hear, honey. Just remember, your mum and I are here, always, her dad said, reaching across to squeeze a hand. I know, Dad. And I appreciate it more than you can know, Theresa replied, squeezing back. As the night drew on, the conversation shifted away from her past and toward the future plans for the community center, ideas for new projects, and Theresa's own aspirations to maybe, one day, start something of her own. Sitting there, with the fire's glow illuminating the faces of her family, Theresa felt a profound sense of contentment and hope. The road ahead was still unfolding, one day at a time, but Theresa was no longer just a traveller on that road. She was shaping its path, guided by the light of her own resilience and renewed dreams. In the quiet of that evening, Theresa realised that the truest form of resurgence wasn't just about rising from the ashes, it was about lighting up the way forward, not just for herself, but for all those whose lives she touched. Let us know in the comments how this story has inspired you, or share your own experiences of overcoming adversity. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heart-touching stories like this one. Hit the bell icon to stay updated with our latest uploads. Your journey through the complexities of the human heart starts now. Remember, your story isn't over yet. It's just a new chapter beginning. Stay strong, stay inspired.